What is going on, guys? Welcome to another video. Today we've watched a very highly requested video. We're taking a trip to Karoud. At least I think that's where they live. Is that where the Dark Eldar live? I think that is. But yeah, today we're checking out Arch's video on the Dark Eldar. This has been requested for months, and I mean months. Like, this has been in my watch later since I uploaded the Conrad Kurz video, which is a while back now. I gave people the option back then if they'd rather see the Dark Eldar or Conrad or a few others. They picked Conrad. I think we've actually gone through all the other ones that I put in those lists, and the Dark Eldar just got pushed back and pushed back. I was putting it off because it's so fucking long, but I think it's time. People have literally been reminding me week after week to watch this, man. So we're going to watch it right here. Cruel Elegance of the Dark Eldar. This is going to be a fucking long video, ladies and gents. So if you're ready, leave a like, man. Leave a comment. Let me know, man. Just let me know something. I'm putting in the hour for you guys for this one. You know, and I need to learn about them, but still. Yeah, man. Be sure to leave a like. Subscribe if you're new. Almost an 800 subs, ladies and gents. So join us on this journey to wherever we're going. But yeah, we're gonna get into this, bro. The Dark Eldar. This should be fun. This should be fun. Just a quick thing I want to say, I'm splitting this into two parts, ladies and gents. In the future, long Warhammer lore videos will be split into parts. I put these into two 40-minute videos, but in the future we'll probably be splitting it into closer to 20-minute videos. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy. Be sure to get a snack and a drink, or maybe you watch this while you do homework or whatever you do it. You know, you watch it while you're doing something else, or listen to it. I probably would do the same, to be honest. Let's do this. Gotta turn it up. Gotta turn it up. Greetings
and salutations, friends, and welcome back to yet more Warhammer 40k lore. Today, we are going to be talking about the Dark Eldar, or, well, that's where the problems immediately begin, doesn't it? Their name. Back in the day, they were called the
dhrukari. Is that what they were called?
The Dark Eldar, simply just to differentiate them between the regular Eldar. The Dark Eldar themselves just refer to themselves as the Eldar, because as far as they're concerned, they're the only real Eldar left. As for the other Eldar, you know, the ones that wander through space on giant...
Yes, they are the only ones left who are pretty much Slaanesh worshippers, to say the least. They indulge in all the pleasures the original Eldar did, which includes sticking their penis in spiky things and in places they shouldn't go in. So, yeah.
Giant spaceships, they refer to them as their Dark Kin. The Inquisition and Ordo Xenos refer to the Dark Eldar as Corrupted Eldar or Chaos Eldar, which also isn't exactly correct. Nobody really knows what to call these bastards for it to be entirely correct. I'll probably just call them Dark Eldar throughout the video because easy, but the Dark Eldar themselves would probably prefer the name Iladerith Yini Asa, which was coined by Vect somewhere in the 4th, 5th edition, I think. And I'm not going to use it because it's complicated to goddamn say, but it's a hell of a lot better than Dhrukari, which is just an ass-backwards name, first and foremost. Okay, so here's a bit of fucking trivia for you. A lot of Eldar and Dark Eldar language is literal ancient Irish and Scot, like Celtic language groups. In the case of Dhrukari, that would be the word druk, or drok, and the Old Irish drukos, meaning evil and or bad. Yep. You might think, like, the Dark Eldar, obviously they're evil, why do you say the name doesn't fit? Well, the Dark Eldar don't think they're evil. Like, they genuinely do not think...
Yeah, but no one thinks they're evil, bro. We just call them evil because they are evil. That's what we call them. Alright? Tigers don't think they're called tigers. You know what I mean?
Think what they're doing is a bad thing.
Yeah, I don't care.
Get into that more later,
but
they don't view that. They are so far beyond any kind of human grasp of morality, they don't even recognize the meaning of the word bad or evil anymore. So literally calling the entire race bad and or evil just seems kind of pointless to me. Then again, we all know why they're now called the Dhrukari, and that's because you couldn't copyright Dark Eldar, but hey, details. Anywho, the naming of the pointy-eared little BDSM lovers is less important, although I still maintain that Dhrukari is a bloody stupid name, but hey, once again, let's not get too hooked on that particular nicety. Let us instead start with their quote-unquote origin story. You might already have heard of this in the Eldar video, but the basic gist of it is, the Eldar, having conquered pretty much the entire galaxy with the help of the Daddy Old Ones and the destruction of the Necrons, had gotten rather complacent, shall we say. They figured that since there was nothing else left in the galaxy to actually threaten them, they might as well cut loose a little bit and really get to partying for all of those years spent slaving under the Old Ones and fighting off those evil weevil Necrons. And it started relatively innocently enough with them simply just pursuing more leisurely pursuits, like the arts, studies, and doing whatever the hell they wanted. They didn't, after all, live pretty much in a post-scarcity society, so why not? But as the...
You know what confuses me? How do you go from just doing whatever you want, painting pictures of rainbows and playing video games and eating at nice restaurants to turning into the fucking darkest of dark porn? You know what I mean? And just killing each other for fun. Like, why?
Decades and centuries flowed by, and things started to get boring. Well, let's just say that the market share of baddragon.com rose drastically. And whilst to begin with, there was nothing particularly wrong with spicing up the old and boring love life a little bit with a glow-in-the-dark condom, there is, however, a rather large leap in...
That would be fucking weird. Don't try that, ladies and gents.
An extremity between said illuminescent dong covering and BDSM.
The word dong is just funny to me. I'm sorry.
Of a level that is entirely defined by the absence of a safe word. This then continued to escalate.
No absence of safe words. Safe words are important. Whether it's pineapple, peach, rainbow, lamp, candle, you need a safe word. In fact, you shouldn't need a safe word. You should discuss your preferences and your do's and don'ts before. Alright? Life advice. Take it, slot it in there. Most of you should know this by now. Most of you are pretty damn fucking old. You're like my age. You're like somewhere between 18 and 25, bro. At least that's what the analytics tell me,
Can only be described as a rather uncomfortable velocity for a very long time. To put it like this, do you know what the word formicophilia means? The Dark Eldar did, and no, you shouldn't Google that. Nor should you Google cholerophilia. Just saying, but the Dark Eldar...
Should I Google it? I don't want to Google it, but I'm gonna Google it. Formicophilia. Okay. I've actually heard of this before. I didn't know what it was called, but I watched one of those Reddit dark confession videos, and it's basically where you put insects inside of your parts, your genitalia. You know what I mean? I don't know what YouTube likes. The whole I might get blocked. I don't want to get in trouble. But yeah, we're gonna search the other one. I don't know what that is, bro. I can't find it. I'm probably just retarded, bro. Can I go in the comments? Well, I'm sure someone will let me know, even if I shouldn't know what it is. Let's go.
But the Dark Eldar would already know what that is.
I don't want to know what it is.
This eventually got so bad that it literally tore asunder the Immaterium, which is quite the achievement, even if one takes into consideration that the Eldar work differently from humans. Their feelings are far more acute than ours. They burn brighter in the warp, and, of course, there's that tiny little thing that a massive percentage of them are psychers. And we all know how much the Demonkinses love their little psychic snacks.
Yes.
And this great cataclysm that would essentially wipe out the Eldar Empire happened right in the heart of their once ever so glorious galaxy-spanning nation.
Well then, not sure how effective that is, but, maybe they wanted some excitement to motivate them for where they got home, to indulge in all their failures,
Tearing the literal heart out of it, and murdering something along the lines of 90% of the Eldar's total population,
Rest in
the only
peace.
survivors belonging to two groups. Either the ones that were currently in the Eldar webway at the time, or the vagabonds, the gypsies of the Eldar world, the ones we know today as the Craft World Eldar. The resultant psychic backlash, being rather considerable in its sheer volume, tore a literal hole in the universe, which we today know as the Eye of Terror. And whilst, of course, the Eye is always flooding the galaxy with chaotic energies...
Hold on. So, Cadia fell because of these lot couldn't keep it in their pants. Nah. Cadia deserved better than this.
It is considerably worse for the Eldar, since Slaanesh, the horrible little deity born from the excess of the Eldar, is literally, at all times, eating the souls of every single Eldar in the galaxy.
What happens?
The Craft World Eldar have gotten around this teensy-weensy problem by supplanting their souls into magical gemstones. These are the Soul Stones. These essentially function as a prismatic containment device in which the soul can rest at peace from the vagaries of chaos. This means that the soul cannot be eaten by Slaanesh, which is rather important, since being eaten by the literal god of suffering and excess is probably not a particularly good fate. And it also prevents the Eldar soul from being lost upon death. Normally, when you die, your soul flies into the immaterium. The soul of your average human isn't really an entity that has any kind of agency in the warp. It is not something that has a mind of its own, so to say. It is an etheric shadow of your former self. You, as a human, for example...
God, I hope when I die it's not actually like that.
...will not live, quote-unquote, in the warp. You won't go to hell, which is what the warp essentially is at that point. Instead, a shadow version of you will be sent in there. The shadow version won't be able to, feel pain or have any real kinds of feelings or sentience at any real level, and as such, it isn't really too much of a bother for a human. Think of it like this. If the minor demons are essentially sharks, then the soul of a human would be something along the lines of a shrimp. Whilst the soul of a psyker might be something more along the lines of, say, a dolphin. A creature capable of certain cognitive functions, and being able...
Well, we might be shrimps, but at least we taste good, yeah? Just cook us a little bit with some butter and garlic. Very nice.
...to realize that it is well and truly fucked upon entering into the immaterium. Hell, it might even survive for a short amount of time before the sharks nom it, but it's rather unlikely. In the case of an Eldar, however, well, that would be something like this. Imagine a very large tank filled with blood-crazed sharks with massive bad dragon dildos hanging off their nethers that all have enough intelligence to make you suffer long and terrible before you die, and then have said human tied up hanging by a rope that is slowly fraying above said shark tank. You have absolutely no idea how long the rope is going to last. The only information you have is the slow snapping and unraveling sounds. Furthermore, the water is dark. You have no idea what's down there, but you know it's going to be really bad. That is how an Eldar soul would feel in the warp. Thus,
I thought he was going to say a dead whale. Everything comes to eat that shit in the water.
You can probably understand why the Eldar would do anything and everything to avoid this particular fate. That, in the case of the Craft World Eldar, would of course again be the Soul Stones, which essentially binds the soul within its own little prismatic prison. This is then usually kept inside of the Craft Worlds and kept safe from any external stimuli. This allows the souls of the Eldar to essentially communicate with each other over the prismatic network. It's not as cool as being alive, but it's definitely a hell of a lot better than being dead.
What is?
But of course, if the Soul Stone should be destroyed, well, then the soul goes flying off into the warp, and see the previous example with the tank for more information on what happens next. The obvious question then becomes, why are the Dark Eldar not using this very same technology?
Because
Well,
they don't give a fuck.
they were insulated to a degree by being within the webway, but the webway, of course, is, you guessed it, inside the warp. The Eldar on the craft worlds were insulated by good old-fashioned distance, which proved a hell of a lot more effective. The warp, of course, is everywhere and nowhere at once, which means that their distance could, of course, be infinite, but it could also be right next door. And just as it happened in this particular case, it was right next door. The Soul Stones simply don't work on the Dark Eldar. They don't have enough of a soul left to protect within the Soul Stones. What they have is constantly being eaten away by Slaanesh. This process will take decades, possibly even centuries, but eventually the Eldar...
Is that why they're so perverted? They're the next thing to Slaaneshi demons. So is that why? Because they have Slaanesh eating them slowly but surely.
will shrivel up into a cold, dead, dry husk. And the soul of the poor little Dark Eldar, well, let's say it like this. Slaanesh is very fond of Eldar souls. He has special things in store for Eldar souls, but Dark Eldar souls, ooh,
buddy,
that is an even more prized commodity. For the Dark Eldar have steeped themselves in pain and suffering and excess for
just seasoning for Slaanesh, that
thousands
is.
of years extra. They are an absolute delicacy to Slaanesh. To use another deviant sexual comparison, which is probably going to be a staple of this video, I am talking about the Dark Eldar after all. A craftable Eldar soul would be a fleshlight, probably better than using your hand, but nothing special. A Dark Eldar soul, however...
It's better than using your hand. Alright, buddy.
Now we're talking $7,000 territory, real doll level quality. There is just no compare. As such, you can imagine, Slaanesh has a vested interest in gathering as many little Dark Eldar souls as chaotically possible. In fact, you will find the Slaaneshi demons go well and truly out of their way to find themselves these most delicious little morsels. And as you can probably imagine, the Dark Eldar take a very, very different view. They would rather not be eaten by Slaanesh for as long as Eldarly possible, and they will do anything and everything to avoid it. And luckily for them, the soul is not an infinite product. Slaanesh can't simply om-nom-nom at them for eternity. They will eventually turn into husks. Realizing this, the Dark Eldar figured, hold on a minute, if our bodies are essentially a container for the soul, and the body can eventually run out of soul, maybe, just maybe, there is a way to top off the glass to refill our souls? And so they began experimenting, realizing rather quickly that the best way of replenishing their own souls was to feed upon the souls of others. And now again we return to the good old-fashioned theory that in the warp, the more extreme the emotion, the better. In other words, to get as much of a refill as possible, the Dark Eldar would have to do something as extreme as possible.
That's where the torture comes in, alright.
Well, luckily for the Dark Eldar, they had a lot of training in being extreme. But of course, the extraction of suffering is, well, it's a complicated business, really. Generally speaking, you won't feel too many people volunteering to have suffering extracted from them. It's generally not a very pleasant work thing.
Or what if it was like a Monster Inc. situation where if you make them laugh, you get more? Yeah, this is Warhammer. Definitely doesn't work like that, though, does it?
The slightest, really. Even less so when it comes to the Dark Eldar. In other words, the Dark Eldar would have to wander off into the galaxy and find somebody else they could make suffer. And as previously mentioned, most living creatures are not particularly fond of suffering, and in the vast majority of circumstances, they will resist anybody who tries to kidnap them specifically for the purpose of torturing them for as long as Dark Eldarly possible. And I would just like to point out real quick that the Dark Eldar have gotten very, 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 very good at making things live for a very, very, very long time, regardless of what they do to it. We then have ourselves a little bit of a dilemma. One, the Dark Eldar would like to find something, preferably something squishy that screams really loudly and is capable of heightened emotions, to torture very, very slowly over an extended period of time.
So, Eldar and
Secondly,
humans.
whatever thing exists in the galaxy that is squishy, capable of screaming very loudly, and capable of fully understanding the horrible things that is being done to it, well, they are unlikely to volunteer. In fact, they are quite likely to resist this with every single piece of equipment they can get their filthy little pink paws on. So, the only solution then is to convince the little creature that it needs to come along. And considering what's waiting for it, you can't do this verbally, can you? Hell, even threatening it with violence is probably relatively ineffective because it would probably prefer to be shot, to be honest. Which means you need to capture them relatively alive, which is a bother. Can you imagine dragging something like that all the way back to Commorragh, kicking and screaming, trying to escape, trying to kill you in your sleep and stuff? It's just not particularly useful, is it? It's downright bothersome, if you ask me. Then, the Dark Eldar came up with a third option. Now, they only need to be around in relative close proximity to enjoy the restorative powers of people screaming really loudly in agony. Why then not simply launch...
So if they keep replenishing their souls, do they just give them Slaanesh more soul? It's not very smart.
large-scale raids into real space out of the webway in which Commorragh is located to find many squishy, screamy things, raid them, bully them for an extended period of time, and then simply leave. After all, once the Dark Eldar are fully regenerated, they can live comfortably for a fairly considerable amount of time before having to do this whole thing again. And it's also important to note that they live off suffering, all kinds of suffering. For example, the various Vich cults in Commorragh will put on massive displays of gladiatorial combat where the wealthiest in Dark Eldar society will go to feed off the suffering of the poor motherfuckers thrown into the arena with the witches. There's also several other ways to gain suffering whilst in Commorraghian society. They don't have to do raiding, but many do so because it is the most effective. There's also, of course, the obvious advantage of being able to gather slaves, whilst having the strength of numbers to contain said slaves, and, naturally, acquiring slaves, acquiring suffering, and acquiring certain choice slaves, like, for example, children. Yeah, I know, it's getting a little bit dark here, but children scream louder than adults, apparently, and their suffering is more visceral. Again, I know, dark as fuck, but we are talking about the dark goddamn Eldar here, so yeah, it is to be expected. And these things can, of course, be sold for vast quantities of good old-fashioned cash within Dark Eldar society. Because they do have a society, they don't purely trade in suffering. That cash can, of course, be used for good old-fashioned food, because they need that as well.
Good old food.
They don't actually live off the soul-feeding thing, it just prevents them from being eaten by an Eldritch deity who wants to butt-sex their souls to death over the course of 17 millennia. Additionally, of course, if you are a literally thousands of years old murderous psychopath, you have certain,
needs.
Vices.
Yeah.
And these vices frequently require large quantities of cash to satisfy.
Okay.
So, raiding is a rather integral part of Dark Eldar society, but, of course, there is one teensy-weensy problem. As I mentioned previously, whatever you are trying to raid, well, it's relatively likely to try to defend itself. Which means that the Dark Eldar might find itself on the wrong side of a very, very large shotgun, which might prove unfortunate for even the Dark Eldar. They do have fairly competent body armor technology, but, you know, you can always get unlucky, and when things are scared absolutely shitless about being tortured to death, it is surprising how much damage even the squishiest of moon kegs can do to the Dark Eldar physique. Not to mention, the Eldar, being, Eldar, are not exactly particularly sturdily built. Their brittle little bones break fairly easily. In other words, casualties are pretty much unavoidable unless they are picking on the most
And they reproduce, though. Like, have kids.
civilian of targets, and even then, in this day and age of 40k, there are very, very few civilian installations that do not have at least a basic level of PDF presence. And thusly, since the chance of catching a stray lasball to the Chrome Dome cannot be
Chrome
entirely removed from the equation, the Dark Eldar had to figure out some way to reduce the risk, first and foremost, and that is why they developed the doctrine of hit-and-run raids. They wish to strike at a target and get the fuck
They've been learning about Jagatai Khan, bro. Alright.
out very, very quickly, so that any necessary medical aid can be rendered. Additionally, the Dark Eldar have gotten very, very, very good at medicine, partly because they need to keep their screaming things alive for as long as possible,
And they need to cure all their STDs.
and of course because they want to keep themselves alive for as long as possible. In fact, they have gotten so good at it that they have figured out a way to essentially resurrect the dead. Now, this process only works on Dark Eldar due to their quirk of physiology and their whole little soul connection with Slaanesh and stuff. If a Dark Eldar is dead, properly dead, made into tiny small pieces and blasted across a vast area, presuming that the pieces can be gathered up and brought back up to their mothership, the homunculi can stitch the various pieces together. Now, of course, there are limitations to this. If you burn a Dark Eldar, for example, yeah, he's probably not going to come back from that, unless, of course, he's just crispy. If he's turned
If he rises like a phoenix from the ashes.
to ash, yeah, he's pretty much fucked. But if he's just been turned into a shriveled mummy, yeah, maybe. If he's had several limbs removed, not a big problem. We can just suture those back together, not an issue. If he has a gaping hole in him somewhere, well, depending on how many of his organs have gone poof, it might complicate matters, but the Dark Eldar are also pretty good at making artificial organs, and in any real space raid, they are going to be making damn sure to be bringing a lot of those along with them. Basically, what I'm saying is, except for the most devastating of trauma, like being squished into a pancake, a Dark Eldar can be brought back to life by the services of the homunculi. First and foremost, of course, the body needs to be stitched together. Then secondly, they are put in a special chamber, which feeds off, dum-dum-dum, you guessed it, suffering. Because, of course. Essentially, it takes the pain of various living creatures and uses that pain as a battery of sort to run this Eldritch machine that regenerates the Dark Eldar in question. The more severe the damage, the more pain necessary. And, of course, since pain comes at a premium in Komaragi society, this is a highly effective, but also a ludicrously expensive way of regenerating somebody, which again means that people need to go on raids just to gather the necessary money to pay for any potential
Money.
restructuring, shall we say. This ability to quite literally bring the dead back to life naturally gives the homunculus a considerable amount of power within Dark Eldar society. Not as much as they once used to hold, but they are, of course, extraordinarily important, and those who control them keep very, very close tabs on them, make sure that they are never wanting in any respect whatsoever. Now, they actually used to be the leaders of the Dark Eldar in their entirety. After the fall, the homunculi used to be the lords of Eldar kind, the most prominent of their species. In the case of these particular ones, they were the ones who avoided the fall by being inside the webway, and in Komarog in particular, when Slaanesh tore his happy little ass free from the warp and ate most of their civilization. They, of course, rose naturally to the top of Dark Eldar society and established what was basically an aristocracy. It is also said that they were the ones who first came up with how to regenerate the Dark Eldar soul, which obviously also made them very important in Dark Eldar society, and realizing this, they have not shared this secret on precisely how to do it with anybody else. Realizing, of course, that this knowledge will essentially make them completely untouchable inside of Dark Eldar society. If they are the only ones sitting on the secret of regenerating the Dark Eldar, well, the Dark Eldar can't kill them, regardless of what they do. They simply cannot do away with them, because if they do, well, then Slaanesh will finally finish om-nom-nomming all of their screaming little souls. And they sure as hell don't want that. This rather one-sided power structure would still have been in place today if it were not for the actions of a certain peasant little bastard by the name of Azarubel Vect, who, he changed shit up rather drastically, to put it mildly. He replaced the old aristocracy of the Homunculi with a rather vicious form of meritocracy, where Dark Eldar society was organized into various cabals. These would then compete against each other for, well, everything. Who could get the most slaves? Who could amass the most wealth? Who could have the most soldiers? Who could have the most control of the largest swaths of Comarog? Who could have the control of various organizations or smuggling operations, etc., etc., etc.? Dear little Vect is definitely going to get a full video on his own and his astronomic rise to power, especially considering Vect is only about 5,000 years old.
Only.
Only, I know, but
Only.
as far as Dark Eldar High Society
Ultramarines. Go on, son.
is concerned, that was a relative newcomer at the time, considering that Dark Eldar society of then was ruled by the old lords of the Old Empire, which stretches back some 10 to 20,000 years.
Lord.
To them, Vect was a stripling. But he turned out to be a rather cunning stripling, if nothing else, and achieved something no Dark Eldar before him had done. But I feel he really does deserve his own video, so we won't go too much into him. Instead, let's talk a little bit more about the Homunculi. They are the oldest things in Dark Eldar society, and naturally, Dark Eldar society being what it is, they are also the most twisted. In fact, some of them are even said to have been around when the original cults of pain and pleasure were originally founded back in the old Eldar Empire, which means that some of these motherfuckers in 40k must be somewhere along the lines of 25 to 30,000 years old.
Lord.
And over the course of their very, very long lives, they have developed some rather interesting fetishes, to put it mildly.
I bet.
They are considered, even by Dark Eldar society at large, to be a bit eccentric and a bit extreme as well.
That's saying a lot, isn't it? That's saying a fucking lot. If you're eccentric in Dark Eldar society, fuck me. I'm gonna try not to pause it, because we still got 40 minutes of this left.
And you know that when a Dark Eldar accuses you of being a little bit over the fucking line, you have truly reached brand new territories of special. In fact, I happen to know what one of their favorite tactics is. It's to force people like you to watch ads.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Whoa, no free publicity.
That was pretty fucking diabolical of me, wasn't it? But
at least it wasn't unskippable.
I would like to point out one more thing. The Homunculi, just like myself, are not beings of, good old-fashioned crazy town or anything. They're not insane, or, well, actually, that would not be entirely correct. They are. They're completely and utterly batshit. Some of them, for example, might choose to only dine upon a salad of eyeballs, entrails, and berry bushes. No particular reason, just they've decided this is what they like. Others might find that wearing bathrobes made out of human skin is just the right way to invigorate them after getting out of a shower. Others might insist on keeping small cohorts of orcs around as servants purely because they find the challenge of causing actual notable pain to greenskins to be so stimulating that they find all other forms of slaves to be utterly pointless. And seeing as the entirety of Dark Eldar society basically rests upon their creepy little shoulders, they can afford it. They essentially have no upper spending limit. They can do whatever the goddamn hell they want, because everybody has to go to them for treatments. Everybody has to go to them for regeneration, and they can simply charge whatever the fuck they want. I did mention that most of Dark Eldar society is essentially a meritocracy via the various cabals, but the homunculi are well and truly above such concerns, because the cabal will simply pay their homunculi whatever they goddamn want because they have to have them. And in fact, having control over a homunculi is in itself worth virtually an infinite amount of money. It really is to the point that Dark Eldar society is so reliant upon what the homunculi sell that they are completely outside of Dark Eldar society as far as economic goes. And hell, not even economics. Dark Eldar society, believe it or not, actually does have rules. You can't just murder someone, for example. Or, well, you can, but you must have at least a basic kind of reason. You know, he did something mean to me, or I wanted his shit. I mean, that's good enough a reason.
Alright.
But you can't just do it for no reason. Not because there's, you know,
I think we should send Conrad Kurz over here. That shit will start real quick.
Police system or anything, but because if you murder somebody belonging to a cabal, then you've just essentially pissed upon that cabal's name and reputation.
You signed your
and
death warrant.
in a society as vicious and violent as Dark Eldar one, that shit cannot stand. And said cabal is going to come after you, flay you, and use your skin as toilet paper. In the case of the homunculi, however, well, to put it like this, they literally have so much power and so much wealth that it would be a complete and utter suicide for the vast majority of cabals to actually go after them.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I've decided that I'm going to part this video into 2 parts. Now, some of you might not like that. It's going to be 2 40-minute parts. Maybe I should have even done a few less parts. But honestly, I feel like I'm going to lose focus. And I'm going to start sitting there on my phone the rest of this fucking vid. So, we'll watch part 2 tomorrow. I'll be back with part 2 tomorrow of Dark Eldar. You guys have waited for this, man. And I don't want to make this video garbage from now on. I've done a lot of talking and shit. I've made it somewhat entertaining. So tomorrow we will continue with Dark Eldar part 2. So I'll see you all tomorrow for part 2.